Let's consider, if you will, a rather peculiar situation. You are standing in the middle of a crowded room. The air is thick, heavy, with the static of 1,000 unsaid things. And suddenly, right there in the center, two people begin to shout. They are locked in a verbal combat, faces flushed, eyes widening, veins standing out on their necks like the roots of an old tree. They are hurling words at one another, sharp, jagged little things, intended to cut, to bind, to conquer. And you watch the spectacle. Now, the ordinary reaction, the reaction of the person who is deeply, deeply asleep in the social drama, is to take a side. We feel a magnetic pull, don't we? We want to judge. He is right, or she is being unreasonable. We want to jump into the fray, to add our own noise to the cacophony, to straighten it all out with the force of our own logic. We feel that if we just shout loud enough or explain clearly enough, the chaos will order itself. But have you ever noticed the reaction of someone who has really woken up? Someone who has realized, even just a little bit, what this whole universe actually is? They tend to go quiet. It isn't the silence of someone who has nothing to say, nor is it the silence of someone who is afraid to speak or someone who is sulking. No. It is a very specific quality of silence. It is the silence of the mirror. It reflects the fire, but it does not burn. Why is this? Why does the spiritually awake person, and let's use that term lightly because the moment you think you are awake, you are usually snoring the loudest, why do they often choose silence over the delicious temptation of a good argument? The illusion of the winner. You see, to argue, you must first believe in a fundamental illusion. You must believe that there are two distinct, separate entities involved. You must believe that there is I over here, inside this bag of skin, and you over there, distinct and alien. And you must believe that for I to be safe or right or valid, you must be defeated. It is the game of black and white. It is the game of up and down. The person who is caught in the argument is playing the game of versus, me versus you, my idea versus your idea. But the awakened eye sees the background. It sees that you cannot have self without other, just as you cannot have a front without a back. When you fight the other, you are, in a very real sense, fighting the condition of your own existence. It is like a dog barking furiously at its own reflection in a pond. The more he barks, the more the other dog barks back. He bares his teeth and the reflection bares its teeth. He becomes frantic. He is ready to tear this enemy to shreds. But if he would only stop, if he would only sit down and pant for a moment, the other dog would sit down too. The silence of the awakened is the realization that there is no one else to fight. Now, this is difficult for us to swallow. Our egos are constructed entirely out of friction. We know who we are by what we are not. I am me because I am not you. And to reinforce this fragile sense of me, I need to constantly bump into you. I need to disagree. I need to assert. I need to defend the fortress. But what happens when you realize the fortress is made of mist? What happens when you see that the ego you are defending is nothing more than an idea, a concept, a hallucination caused by a mixture of memory and social convention? You stop wasting energy defending a ghost. The trap of words. There is another layer to this which we must explore. It involves the very nature of language itself. We treat words as if they were facts, as if they were hard little stones that we can trade and throw. But words are not facts. Words are noises. They are squiggles of ink. They are conventions. The map is not the territory. You can eat the menu all day long, but you will never get full. When two people argue, they are usually arguing about the menu. They are fighting over symbols. One person says, God is a father, and the other says, no, God is a cosmic force. And they are ready to kill each other over the description of the dinner, completely missing the taste of the food. The awakened person knows that the truth, The IT, the Tao, the Brahman, whatever you wish to call that which cannot be named, cannot be captured in a net of words. The moment you speak it, you have limited it. As the old Zen saying goes, the instant you speak about a thing, you miss the mark. So, when someone comes to the sage and demands a debate on the nature of reality, or politics, or morality, the sage often remains silent, not because he doesn't know, but because he knows that saying is not knowing. Imagine you are watching a sunset. It is a glorious symphony of purple and gold burning the horizon. And standing next to you is a man who turns his back to the sun and wants to argue with you about the chemical composition of the atmosphere. He wants to prove to you that the color is actually a refraction of light through dust particles. Now, he is technically correct, but he is missing the sunset. If you argue with him, you join him in missing the sunset. You turn your back on the glory to fight over the grammar. So you simply keep watching the sun go down, and perhaps, if you are wise, you put a hand on his shoulder and turn him around. But you do not shout. You cannot shout someone into seeing the beauty. You can only invite them. The futility of force. This brings us to the principle of Wu Wei, or non-forcing. Have you ever tried to smooth out rough water with a flat iron? It is a hopeless task. The more you strike the water to flatten it, the more you disturb it. The only way to smooth the water is to leave it alone. Arguments are an attempt to force the world into a specific shape. We want the other person to fit into our mental box. You should think like this. You should behave like this. We are trying to flatten the water with our fists. The awakened spirit understands the organic nature of the universe. Things grow. Things change. People wake up when they are ready to wake up, just as a fruit falls from the tree only when it is ripe. You cannot pry the apple off the branch and expect it to be sweet. You cannot pry a person's mind open with a crowbar of logic and expect them to be enlightened. So there is a great patience in this silence. It is a trust in the intelligence of the universe. It is an understanding that confusion is part of the process of clarity. When you hear a discordant note in a piece of music, you don't stop the orchestra and scream at the violin player. You wait, you listen, because you know that the discord is leading toward a resolution. The tension is necessary for the release. The person who is arguing is in a state of high tension. They are knotted up. If you tighten your own knot to meet them, you get a deadlock. But if you remain loose, if you remain fluid, the energy passes through you. You do not become a wall for them to bounce off of. You become the space in which they can dissolve. It is the difference between a rock and water. If you punch a rock, you hurt your hand. The rock resists. It fights back with its hardness. If you punch water, the water gives way. It yields. It offers no resistance. And yet, the water surrounds your fist. It encompasses it. And eventually, the water always wins. The rock crumbles into sand, but the water remains. The fear behind the noise. Let us go deeper. What is fueling the argument? What is the gasoline in the engine? Almost always, it is fear. When someone shouts at you, when they attack your character or your ideas, they are really saying, "I am afraid." They are afraid that their worldview is threatened. They are afraid that if they are wrong, they will cease to matter. They are afraid of the unknown. The ego is a very frightened little thing. It is like a shell, and it knows that inside there is nothing but space. So it armors itself with opinions. I am a Republican. I am a socialist. I am a believer. I am an atheist. These are armor plates, and when you scratch the paint, the ego screams. The awakened person hears the scream, but they also hear the fear beneath it. And you do not argue with fear. You do not comfort a terrified child by debating the logic of the monster under the bed. You comfort the child by turning on the light. And sometimes, silence is the brightest light of all. Because when you do not react, when you do not defend, you deprive the other person's ego of the fuel it needs to burn. You break the cycle. You show them by your very presence that it is possible to exist without defenses, that it is possible to be naked and not be afraid. Part 2. The Empty Boat and the Great Charade. Now this brings us to a delightful parable from the old Taoist sage Chuang-Tzu. I have always been fond of this one because it cuts right to the heart of our indignation. He imagines a man crossing a river in his small boat. It is a misty morning, the water is gray and swift. Suddenly, out of the fog, another boat comes crashing into him. Smash! Now, if there is a man in that other boat, our traveler screams. He shakes his fist. He yells, "Can't you see where you are going, you idiot, you scoundrel?" His blood boils. He is fully engaged in the drama of right and wrong. But if he looks into the other boat and sees that it is empty, that it has simply drifted loose from its mooring and was carried by the current, what happens to his anger? It vanishes instantly. He might be annoyed that his boat is damaged, yes, but he does not argue with the empty boat. He does not lecture the wood for being irresponsible. He does not demand an apology from the tide. There is no one to be angry at. This is the secret that the awakened ones have discovered. Everyone is an empty boat.
When someone comes at you full of fury, full of wrong ideas, full of malice, they are being driven by the currents of their conditioning. They are being propelled by the winds of their past trauma, their culture, their parents, their biochemistry, their fear. There is no captain inside the boat doing it on purpose, though it certainly looks that way. There is just a process, a happening. If you truly see this, if you see that the person shouting at you is a manifestation of the total universe acting in a particular, perhaps rather wiggly way, then the urge to argue dissolves. You don't argue with a cloud for raining on your picnic. You might open an umbrella, or you might go inside, but you don't stand in the field and debate the cloud on the ethics of precipitation. The great charade of control. We argue because we are under the hallucination that we are in control. We believe that if we can just manipulate the external world, including the people in it, to align with our internal map, then we will finally be at peace. It is the desire to play God, but it is a very anxious kind of God. The silence of the awakened is the abandonment of this desire to control. It is the recognition that the world is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. When you are in an argument, you are essentially saying, this moment is wrong, this person is wrong, this situation should not be happening as it is happening. You are resisting the flow of the Tao. You are swimming upstream, thrashing your arms, swallowing water, exhausting yourself. To choose silence is to turn around and float. It is to say, so this is what is happening now. Tension is happening. Disagreement is happening. Loud noises are happening. You watch it. You witness it. But you do not try to grab the water and shape it into a cube. Now, please do not mistake this for passivity. This is not the behavior of a doormat. A doormat is silent because it has no choice. The sage is silent because he sees the game. There is a world of difference. The sage might act. He might walk away. He might tell a joke. He might, in extreme cases, issue a sharp, shocking shout, like the Zen masters of old, to snap the other person out of their trance. But he does not engage in the tug-of-war. Because you see, it takes two to pull on a rope. If you drop your end of the rope, the other person falls down. And often, that is the kindest thing you can do for them. You refuse to support their neurosis. You refuse to validate the game of us versus them. The dance of yes and no. Let's look at this from the point of view of vibration. Life, existence, the whole cosmos is a vibration. It goes on and off, up and down, crest and trough. You cannot have a wave with only crests. That would be a flat plateau, not a wave. In the world of ideas, this manifests as yes and no, right and wrong, self and other. These opposites are not enemies, they are lovers. They generate one another.
You cannot feel virtuous unless there is someone sinful to compare yourself to. You cannot be the sensible one unless there is an irrational one standing in front of you. When we argue, we are trying to eliminate the other pole. We want a world of only crests. We want everyone to agree, everyone to be right, which means being like me. But if everyone agreed, there would be no conversation, no drama, no play. The universe would be a static hum of monotony. The awakened eye sees the argument as a dance. It sees the yes and the no swirling around each other. And when you see it as a dance, you don't need to make the music stop. You don't need to trip your partner. You simply realize that for this moment, the music is discordant. It is a jazz improvisation gone a bit wild. So you listen. The art of deep listening. This brings us to the positive side of silence. Silence is not just the absence of speech, it is the presence of listening.
Most of us never truly listen. When the other person is talking, we are not hearing them, we are rehearsing our rebuttal. We are scanning their sentences for weak points, like a general scanning a fortress wall for a crack. Aha, he said always, but I can prove he only did it twice. I have him now. This is not listening, this is reloading. The spiritual choice of silence is an act of profound love. It is the choice to completely empty oneself of one's own noise so that you can truly receive the other person, to take them in, to hear not just their words, but the tremble in their voice, the hesitation, the underlying plea. When you listen to someone in this way, without judgment, without preparation, without defense, a strange miracle often occurs. The other person begins to hear themselves. Have you ever noticed that? When you stop fighting, the other person often runs out of steam. They start to stammer. They start to qualify their statements. Well, I mean, not always, but sometimes. They begin to dismantle their own argument because the resistance they were leaning against has suddenly vanished. You have become a void. And the nature of a void is that it draws things out. By being silent, you draw out the poison. You let them speak it all out until there is nothing left but the quiet. The witness behind the mask. Who is it that chooses silence? It is not Alan Watts, the personality. It is not the ego with a name and an address and a reputation to uphold. The ego loves noise. The ego is noise. The one who chooses silence is the witness, the observer, the deep inward eye that is the same in you as it is in me. When you rest in that witness consciousness, you see your own emotions rising. You feel the flush of anger. You hear the thought, I need to tell him he's an idiot. You see it all, but you do not identify with it. You treat your own reaction just like you treat the other person's shouting, as a phenomenon passing through the sky of your mind. Ah, there is anger. How interesting. My heart is beating faster. My hands are clenching. Isn't that fascinating? You don't suppress it. You don't pretend you aren't angry. You simply don't give the anger the power to drive the bus. You sit in the back seat and watch the scenery. And because you are watching, you have a choice. The sleeping person has no choice. They are a stimulus response machine. Button pushed, robot angry. Button pushed, robot yells. But the awake person sees the button, sees the finger coming to push it, and steps aside. They realize that the self that is being offended is just an image. It is a mask, and you cannot hurt the space behind the mask. You can burn the picture of a fire, but you cannot burn the paper it is drawn on with the fire in the picture. You can slash the image of a man, but the canvas remains whole. The silence is the canvas. It is the realization that you are vast enough to contain the argument, to contain the anger, to contain the contradiction without being destroyed by any of it. You are the sky, and the argument is just a thunderstorm. It flashes, it booms, it scares the dogs, and then it passes. And the sky is exactly as it was before, untouched, blue, open. Part 3, the sound of the universe breathing. And so we come to the practical matter of it. How does one live this? Because it is all very well to sit on a mountaintop and be silent where the only conversationalist is a pine tree. But what about when you are at the dinner table? What about when the boss is shouting or the political climate is boiling over? The integration of this silence into daily life requires a fundamental shift in how we view our relationship with the world. We typically view life as a problem to be solved. We carry around this heavy toolbox of logic, reason, and argumentation looking for loose screws. We think, if I can just tighten this opinion here and hammer down that behavior there, the machine of life will finally run smoothly. But life is not a machine. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be experienced. When you stop arguing with reality, you are left with the experience of reality. And this experience is what we call the now.
The person who is arguing is never in the now. Have you noticed? They are always in the past. You said this yesterday, or in the future. If we don't stop this, disaster will happen. They are time traveling. They are ghosts haunting the timeline. The awakened one chooses silence to stay anchored in the eternal present. In this moment, right now, is there actually a problem? Not the thought of a problem, but an actual physical problem? Usually, the answer is no. There is just breathing. There is just sitting. There is just the sound of a voice raising and lowering in pitch. The muddy water. There is a profound trust involved here. It is the trust that things have a way of balancing themselves if you don't meddle too much. Imagine a jar of muddy water. You want the water to be clear. Now, the arguer puts his hands in the jar and tries to push the mud down. He swirls the water, trying to separate the dirt from the clear liquid. But the more he churns, the muddier it gets. The wise person simply puts the jar on the shelf and leaves it alone. They sit and watch, and slowly, relentlessly, inevitably, the mud settles to the bottom and the water becomes crystal clear. This is the power of silence. It allows the mud of the mind to settle. When you refuse to engage in the frantic churning of an argument, you create a space of stillness around you. And often, the other person feels this. They feel the lack of resistance. They feel that their mud is not being stirred up by your mud. And they too begin to settle. It doesn't always happen instantly, but it is the only way it can happen. You cannot force clarity. You can only provide the conditions for it. The great humor of it all. Now, we must not get too serious, or we shall lose the point entirely. The universe is, at its heart, a play, a game of hide and seek, Leela as the Hindus call it. The awakened person sees the humor in the argument. They see two masks of God shouting at each other, pretending to be strangers. It is a cosmic joke.
When you see the joke, you cannot really argue with a straight face. You might play along for a bit, just for the fun of the dance, but you are not invested in the outcome. You know that whether the coin lands on heads or tails, it is still the same coin. This is why the old sages were often depicted laughing. They weren't laughing at anyone, they were laughing with the universe. They saw the incredible, intricate, frantic absurdity of the human drama. People rushing about, defending their imaginary territories, protecting their conceptual egos, and they saw that beneath it all, everything is perfectly fine. The stars are not arguing. The trees are not forming committees to decide the direction of growth. The ocean does not debate the shore. They just are. To choose silence is to join that great cosmic isness. It is to stop pretending that you are the general manager of the universe and to realize you are just part of the show. And what a relief that is! What a burden you put down when you realize you don't have to be right. You don't have to win. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. You are free to simply be. The final paradox, the thunderous silence. So, does this mean we never speak? Do we sew our lips shut and become hermits? Heavens no! That is just another form of rigidity. That is the mute trying to out-silence the chatterbox. That is still a game. The true silence I speak of is an internal silence. It is a silence that can exist even while you are speaking. You can speak the truth, you can state your case, you can write poetry, you can sing. But underneath the words, there is no desperate grasping. There is no neediness. You speak like a bird sings. The bird doesn't sing to advance its career. It doesn't sing to win an argument with the bird in the next tree. It sings because the song bubbles up and spills over. It is an expression of life, not a manipulation of it. When you speak from this place of internal silence, your words have weight, they have power. They are not jagged stones, they are seeds. They may not win the argument in the moment, but they plant something deep in the listener's psyche.
And when you choose not to speak, that silence also speaks. It speaks of a peace that passes understanding. It speaks of a security that requires no defense. Conclusion: returning to the source. Let us close by returning to where we started: the noise, the conflict, the separate self trying to scream its existence into significance. If you listen very closely to a noise, any noise, and you follow it back to its source, what do you find? Sound comes out of silence, and it returns to silence. The silence is the background, the canvas, the womb. Without silence, there could be no sound. Without space, there could be no stars. The spiritually awake person is simply one who has fallen in love with the background. They have realized that the figure, the ego, the argument, the drama, is just a fleeting shape dancing on the surface of the deep. So the next time you feel the heat rising, the next time the urge to set them right grabs you by the throat, try an experiment. Just stop, take a breath, feel the ground under your feet. Look at the person in front of you, not as an enemy, but as a clouded mirror. And rest in the silence. Don't do it to be good. Don't do it to be spiritual. Do it because it is the only way to taste the reality of the moment. Do it because, in that silence, the illusion of separation dissolves, and you remember, finally, who you really are. You are not the noise. You are the vast, open, listening sky in which the noise happens. And the sky never argues with the clouds. Shh, listen.